Hello everyone. Welcome back to Oni-chan. In a world where every person carries an invisible wound within, there is a school founded to save those lost souls. The story follows a boy with a bloody and mysterious past. He transfers to Mahama Academy, hoping to live a normal life there. But here, he meets 5 girls, each carrying their own painful story. Can this boy save those girls? Stay tuned with Oni-chan to find out. This boy's name is Yuji. He is on his way to Mahama Academy. Mahama Academy appears peaceful on the outside. However, Yuji becomes curious, because there are only a few strange female students there. Mahama Academy has a total of only 6 students, which surprises Yuji, and the one helping him get familiar with the place is named Saki. She is a first-year student here. Saki is introducing Yuji to the student dormitory. Just then, the principal of Mahama Academy appears. Her name is Chizuru. At this moment, Yuji becomes curious. Why is Saki wearing a maid outfit? So she explains. Because Saki was assigned the role of class representative. Everyone told Saki that she looked great in a maid outfit. So Saki tries to wear the maid outfit whenever she can. The two continue to tour the campus together. When it's time for Yuji to take a bath, he thinks about the life of a normal student. And Yuji continues to live his routine as usual. He usually wakes up early to go jogging every morning. Yuji always remembers what his master taught him. Run fast and possess superior strength. And finally, always feed your brain with knowledge. Today is Yuji's first day of class. He greets his new classmates in a friendly way. The first girl is named Amane. She's the big sister who takes care of everyone here. And the shy girl is named Makina. She seems very timid around strangers. Yuji is on his way to class. When he walks into the classroom, Yuji accidentally sees a girl practicing a play inside. Her name is Michiru, but Yuji's sudden appearance makes Michiru feel flustered and scared, because she knows that first impressions with transfer students are important. However, Michiru still tries her best to find a way to befriend Yuji, even though she is still very panicked. At this moment, Yuji was curious about Michiru's hair color, because he thought it looked very fake and unnatural. This made Michiru feel annoyed, because she thought Yuji was making fun of her. However, Yuji was just trying to introduce himself to Michiru, but she rejected his offer. Eventually, the other classmates started to arrive, and Chizuru also came to class. However, one student who often came late was still missing. Her name was Sakari. A moment later, Saki introduced the school facilities to Yuji, which made Yuji feel very grateful. Suddenly, Saki apologized to him, but without giving a clear reason, which left Yuji confused by her actions. At that point, he felt he needed to stay alert in this place. After that, Yuji returned to class. He found out that the girl sitting by the window was Sakari, and he went over to greet her, but Sakari gave him a cold attitude. To Yuji's surprise, he quickly noticed her next move. It turned out to be a knife she had prepared beforehand. A while later, Sakari still intended to attack Yuji with that knife, and Yuji continued to dodge it. But the things Yuji was doing made it impossible for Sakari to forgive him. Yuji curiously asked if the only thing Sakari could think of was to try and kill him. But it seemed that Yuji knew that attempted murder wasn't something in Sakari's nature. At that moment, Sakari walked away right after. In class A, Amane noticed that Yuji was having trouble. She felt that Yuji might have approached Sakari too quickly. One day, Sakari might even end up killing him. However, Yuji felt extremely irritated by Amane's words and actions at that moment. When it was break time, Yuji sat reading a book in the school courtyard. By chance, he discovered Makina lying motionless under a tree. So Yuji walked over to check on her, but everything turned out to be fine, which made Yuji think that Makina was a strange girl. Then, when Makina woke up, Yuji quietly observed her every move. At that moment, Makina was just about to fall into the pond. Luckily, Yuji managed to catch her in time. So Makina quickly thanked him and walked away. But Yuji managed to ask why Makina had been avoiding him. And after a while, the two of them began to talk with each other. They sat together under the tree to catch lobsters. There, Yuji revealed some information about the creature. This made Makina excited. After a while, she thanked Yuji for taking the time to play with her. As for Sakari, she came to see Chizuru to oppose Yuji's admission to Mahama Academy, because allowing a boy into an all-girls school. Sakari feared Yuji might do something inappropriate, but Chizuru believed that would never happen. Since that day, Sakari skipped school to search for information about Yuji. However, she couldn't uncover his identity. She believed Yuji wasn't an ordinary person. Sakari couldn't let the matter go. She kept attacking Yuji, but Yuji completely ignored her. And so, Sakari walked away again. Yuji came to Chizuru to find out the reason. According to Chizuru, it was because Sakari felt afraid when a stranger entered her territory. It turned out Sakari had been here since Mahama Academy first opened. Until now, she always had information about everyone who came. But Yuji was an exception. So Chizuru guessed that Sakari wanted to eliminate Yuji. Issues like this are also part of student life. Although Yuji has trouble adjusting to this new environment, he seems to be enjoying himself. However, every time Yuji sees his own smile, he immediately feels a chill down his spine. He looks different, as if he's not himself. Whenever Yuji thinks about it, he suddenly wakes up in shock. Chizuru thinks Yuji will get used to things soon, because the other girls also have similar situations. Just as Yuji suspected, the others are also unique cases like him. Everyone who comes here has their own reason. There are some whose lives would be seriously affected if their reasons were ever made public. A while later, in the yard, Yuji and Makina happened to run into each other. The two talked a lot about themselves. Even Amane was surprised by how close they'd become. If only Sakari could be like that too. But Yuji didn't know what to do, because Sakari still didn't trust him. Suddenly, Amane noticed a stranger standing in front of the school. But Yuji said he didn't know her and quickly walked away. However, he told Amane and Makina to go ahead without him. He then went back to talk to the mysterious girl. Her name was Yuria. She came to see if Yuji could become a normal student at a normal school. But Yuji coldly sighed and didn't want Yuria to come here like this again. So Yuria understood and prepared to leave. At that moment, Yuji was surprised because Yuria had come all this way just to see him. That was all. Then Yuria quickly ran off. According to what Yuji said, Yuria was a woman who had nothing but gossip. But at the moment, Yuji didn't know how to explain things to Amane and the others. When Yuji entered the classroom, everyone was curious about the blonde woman. So Yuji quickly replied, Yuria was just his guarantor and his boss. However, Amane still had some important questions. She thought Yuria was Yuji's girlfriend. But Yuji immediately denied that ridiculous question. So Amane walked away. Suddenly, Yuji noticed that Michiru had overheard the conversation, which left her confused. In the afternoon after class, Sakari suddenly attacked Yuji from behind. But this time, Yuji couldn't hold back his strength. It left Sakari feeling confused. At that moment, Yuji told Sakari clearly that they weren't enemies. So he asked Sakari not to waste time on this. But she wanted to know Yuji's weakness. And Yuji immediately refused, because that was something he couldn't reveal. This time, Sakari was especially irritated when Yuji called her by name. But Yuji didn't know what else to call her, which led to a small argument between them. After some back and forth, they eventually found a way to resolve it. The next day, Yuji continued his morning run. But when he returned, he discovered that Amane was sneaking into his room. However, her reasons were absolutely ridiculous. Because she wanted to wake Yuji up with a surprise kiss. At that moment, Yuji walked into the room. Amane was embarrassed when she saw him. A while later, Makina was late for class. Because Amane had locked her in the bathroom. So they were both rushing to get to class. In class, Saki was preparing drinks for everyone at lunch. At that moment, Amane looked annoyed. Recently, Makina kept copying Yuji's gestures. But no one could blame her, because Makina was easily influenced by others. Suddenly, Sakari reminded them that today, Amane and Makina had to prepare for the afternoon class. However, Yuji was very annoyed by Amane's behavior. At that moment, Sakari revealed that Amane wasn't always like this, because she had suffered psychological trauma from a car accident. Later, when Amane's group returned, Saki still hadn't come back, which made everyone worried. Turns out Saki was at the train station buying drinks. This made Yuji even more convinced that none of the girls here were normal. At that point, Sakari emphasized that Yuji was one of them too. A while later, during break time, while Yuji was quietly reading a book alone, he noticed someone was out on the field. So Yuji curiously went to take a look. It turned out that a cat had followed Michiru all the way there. It seemed to like her. But Michiru thought she had to take the cat home, because they couldn't keep it in the dorm. This time, Michiru needed Yuji's help. so he tried everything he could to chase the cat away. In the end, the two of them succeeded. A while later, Yuji agreed to do something for Saki, although he still didn't know what it was about. It seemed that Yuji was sleep deprived, so he was having trouble concentrating. Suddenly, Saki needed to take Yuji's measurements to make a shark-shaped bag. At that moment, Yuji was extremely confused, because he had no idea what was going on. Turns out, Yuji had been responding unconsciously about a shark bag similar to Chizoru's, so Saki thought Yuji wanted one just like it. Surprisingly, Saki was really passionate about this. But once Yuji started thinking clearly, he realized he would be forced to wear it all day, so he decided he didn't want it anymore. Unfortunately, Saki had already almost finished making it. Yuji was trying to find a way to turn it down, but he was struggling because of Sachi's enthusiasm. At that point, Yuji blamed himself for not getting enough sleep, which made everything more and more complicated. And then Saki completed the bag based on Yuji's idea, but Michiru cleverly made Makina like it, giving Yuji a chance to get rid of the bag. So Michiru successfully saved Yuji in that situation. Later, back in class, this time, Amane acted naturally around Yuji, but Yuji seemed irritated because Amane had interfered too much in his life. So Amane felt guilty, but she was still sincere about her own feelings. Ever since Yuji's master passed away, he had been trying to live without relying on anyone. Yuji wondered whether he could ever experience a normal life. The next morning, while Yuji was out jogging, he ran into Michiru on a hill. It turned out she was gazing at the sea. Because at that moment, Michiru felt like all her troubles had become very small. The cat from before had also followed her there. Yuji thought that might be another reason she came here. Now Yuji could also feel the serenity of this place. Although Michiru loved the sea, she was afraid of looking at the sky, because Michiru felt like she was trapped in a box, and she found it extremely hard to breathe. Suddenly, Michiru got curious about Yuji. She asked what happens when someone dies. At that moment, Yuji thought it was like falling asleep and never waking up. Michiru suddenly found that idea interesting, and if she were to die, Michiru said she'd want to be buried here. But those were just her hypothetical thoughts. Then came the next day, but Yuji was still thinking about that conversation. Makina even thought Michiru was an alien, but Yuji didn't believe that at all. Saki even claimed that Michiru had already died, and the current Michiru was a completely different person. However, those were just everyone's personal opinions. A while later, Yuji heard a strange noise coming from Sakari, but it actually came from Chizoru. Sakari panicked, thinking she was a monster. But eventually, everyone went to bed. The next morning at school, Yuji noticed that Michiru was acting strangely. Her chest was in serious pain. So Yuji advised Michiru to return to the dorm, but she refused and ran off somewhere else. Even so, Yuji still knew exactly where Michiru would be. Michiru was surprised that Yuji would come find her here. She loved this place and started saying strange things, which left Yuji confused about what she really meant. When he looked into her eyes, he realized that this girl wasn't the Michiru he once knew. At that moment, Michiru said it didn't matter who she really was, but she wanted to talk for a bit. She asked Yuji to introduce himself. Yuji was puzzled by such a request from Michiru. It turned out that Michiru had never had a boyfriend before, so she was curious to know what it would be like. Then, Michiru slowly kissed Yuji on the lips. After a while, Michiru suddenly seemed surprised by her own action. At that moment, Michiru's familiar gestures returned, which made Yuji feel reassured, because he thought she was finally back to normal. The next day, Michiru kept complaining about Sakari, because Sakari refused to do any physical activity. But Sakari turned the suspicion back on Michiru, claiming that Michiru was the one who never exercised. Michiru proudly declared that she was a super athlete. However, Sakari had never seen her show any such skill. After observing carefully, Yuji was sure that the girl he had met on the hill was completely different from the Michiru he saw now. So Yuji didn't know what was truly going on. A while later, Michiru curiously asked what Yuji was thinking, but he didn't answer and walked away. So Michiru chased after him. It turned out she couldn't remember what had happened between them the day before. Because of that, Yuji slowly leaned in close to Chizoru's lips, which caused her to panic and run away. That afternoon, after school, Michiru ran to the hill to look for the cat. But she couldn't find it. As the sun was about to set, Yuji thought they should head back. However, Yuji told Michiru to go ahead first, because he had discovered that the cat had been hit by a car. This made Michiru extremely worried. The next morning, Yuji asked Chizuru how she was doing. Fortunately, she was okay. At that moment, Makina appeared. She wanted to play ball with Yuji. However, Yuji had arranged to meet Michiru on the rooftop to talk. He wanted to know where the real Michiru was. But Michiru revealed that the person Yuji was looking for would never appear again. She had fallen deep into the darkness. This confused Yuji. Then Michiru said it had been a decision made long ago, and she advised Yuji not to worry about it anymore. That afternoon, Saki came to Yuji's room to talk about Chizuru. On the day Michiru got sick, she had given Saki a mysterious box. And now, Saki had handed it to Yuji. However, the box seemed to be locked. Saki tried every possible way to open it, and that was what made Saki hesitate. So she handed the box over to Yuji to deal with. Yuji accepted the responsibility of taking care of it. Suddenly, he accidentally unlocked it, so Yuji decided to check what was inside. Even though it was already late at night, Yuji was determined to meet Chizuru. Unexpectedly, he discovered a diary inside. It was used to exchange messages between the two personalities within Chizuru. It turned out that inside her body, there were two identities. The previous personality of Michiru had chosen to give up on life, but the current one didn't know what to do. Suddenly, Yuji thought that the Michiru standing here now had the right to live a new life freely. This left Michiru unsure of what to do, because she believed this body didn't truly belong to her. At that moment, Yuji tried to find a way to help Michiru think about the life she had now. But Michiru said she wanted to die, because she didn't want to watch everyone around her disappear. This time, Yuji finally understood the reason behind it all. He followed Chizuru's wishes and buried Michiru in the place she loved the most. From that point on, Michiru could gradually feel the sensation of death. It turned out that ever since she was a child, Michiru always felt like she was a failure. Gradually, her spirit kept deteriorating, and then, Michiru decided to take her own life. Luckily, another person inside Michiru saved her. The two of them became friends, but her condition continued to get worse. Returning to the present, Michiru doesn't like this, and she is extremely afraid. Suddenly, the friend inside Michiru appears. She wonders why Michiru is so scared. Then she gets angry because Michiru has been wasting her current life. Because at some point, when Michiru had lost everything, she created a fake life with many different characters. Michiru's goal was to make everyone laugh, and to suppress her own emotions. However, Michiru cannot stay behind forever. At this moment, Michiru tries to break free from there. Just then, Yuji shows up to help her. Because Yuji knows that Michiru doesn't want to disappear either, he waited until Michiru could escape from that place. And then, Yuji walks away. Unexpectedly, Michiru hugs him from behind. On the way back, Yuji sincerely tells her the truth about Chizuru, which deeply moves her. The next day, Yuji took Michiru to a secret place. It was Chizuru's old house, a place she never thought she would return to. And since that day, the other Michiru has never appeared again. Anyway, everything has come to an end. In this world, moving forward is the future. As for Sakari, she had been isolated by others since she was a child, which made Sakari feel extremely lonely. But she had done some frightening things. While everyone else was having fun, Sakari went outside, so Yuji followed her. At that moment, Sakari noticed Yuji's suspicious behavior. It turned out that Yuria had asked him to protect Sakari wherever she went, because she was the only daughter of the president of a railway corporation. Sakari was currently in danger. When the two of them were close to each other, Yuji learned that Sakari didn't like interacting with people, so she just wanted to be alone. Suddenly, it started pouring rain, and a group of strange men appeared. Yuji quickly took care of them, and the two of them ran away together. At that moment, Sakari was surprised by Yuji's strength. She revealed her father had wanted a son to inherit his fortune, but that woman gave birth to Sakari instead, and her body was too weak to have another child, so she endured criticism from her husband. Over time, Sakari's mother's health worsened, so her father admitted her to the hospital. Sakari's mother always felt lonely. Even Sakari felt the same way. That's why she couldn't make any friends. Later on, Sakari's father's second wife gave birth to a son. This shocked her mother and led her to commit suicide. After that death, Sakari was mocked by many of her classmates. and her father established a school to isolate Sakari from society. That school was Mahama Academy. But Sakari felt extremely uncomfortable staying there. Suddenly, Yuji thought that none of this had anything to do with him. So he walked away. When Sakari's father heard the news, he became furious and decided to expel Yuji. Otherwise, Sakari would have to study abroad immediately. A while later, Sakari stayed locked in her room constantly. This made everyone worried. At that moment, Sakari's father came to the school. His name was Michiaki. Right now, Yuji was standing directly in front of him. But Michiaki wanted Sakari to come out and face him. So she showed up. Unexpectedly, Sakari pointed a gun at Michiaki. It frightened everyone. The situation became extremely tense. Because Sakari didn't want to obey Michiaki's orders. But Michiaki begged her in every possible way to come back home. Sakari believed Michiaki had never truly understood her. So she chose the most foolish way to sever their father-daughter relationship. Sometime later, Michiaki visited Sakari's grave. Surprisingly, Yuji was also there. Yuji came to thank him for keeping Mahama Academy alive. But he didn't understand why Michiaki did it. It turned out Michiaki had found a letter in Sakari's room. Her only simple request was to preserve the school. Sakari's final moments stayed deeply engraved in Michiaki's heart. And he would spend the rest of his life understanding that meaning. Unexpectedly, Sakari was behind him. Having heard everything, it turned out everything was part of Yuji's plan. He had prepared everything to save Sakari. And from now on, Sakari's new life would begin. The next morning, Saki was diligently sweeping the yard. Lately, she noticed that Michiru had changed a lot. And Sakari too. The two of them looked so cheerful. Completely different from before. Saki thought the reason might be Yuji. Because ever since he appeared, everyone had started to change in a positive way. Saki knew it was a good thing. But she didn't feel happy about it. Unfortunately, Saki suddenly fell ill. But luckily, by the next morning, her condition had improved. So everyone felt less worried. When they came to class, Chizuru was surprised that Yuji was absent today. Especially when there was an important test coming up. It turned out he had gone to an amusement park. By the time evening came, Yuji returned to the school. At that moment, Saki had locked herself in her room. Because she was anxious about the upcoming test. This made everyone outside extremely worried. After Yuji heard the news, he decided to try talking to Saki. Before heading back to his room, Sakari revealed something to Yuji. A girl once burned down a school, just to avoid taking a test. But Yuji didn't believe such a thing really happened. At that moment, Sakari advised him not to say anything that might push Saki into doing something dangerous. However, Yuji was confident. He wouldn't let anyone end up in danger. And with that, Sakari walked away. Back to Sachi's side, she was haunted by the idea of having to be a good child. In the days that followed, Saki studied hard for the upcoming test. Everyone in class kept an eye on her behavior. At night, Saki secretly did strange things all by herself. She had placed several bombs throughout the area. At that moment, everyone else was also there. It was because Yuji had called them all. Saki was surprised, because she feared it would ruin her original plan. So she tried to send everyone away. However, nothing bad ended up happening. It turned out Yuji had disabled all the bombs. Because he had already figured out the reason behind it all. He learned that Sachi's parents had been in an accident. At that moment, Saki recalled her past. Her family used to run a small workshop. They weren't wealthy, but they loved Saki deeply. However, her parents became busier with work over time. So they didn't have time to pay attention to Saki anymore. And that was when she met Yuji. When she saw the loneliness on Yuji's face, Saki felt a sense of empathy with him. So the two of them played together to forget that feeling of loneliness. But then, Yuji suddenly disappeared. After that, Saki was left all alone again. So she started taking her anger out on her parents. One day, while she was at the park, Saki suddenly realized she had said awful things. And when she saw her parents again, they had already gotten into a serious car accident. Ever since then, Saki had always blamed herself. She believed her own selfishness caused everything to go wrong. That's why she constantly tried to be a good girl. In that moment, Yuji gently comforted her. He told her that she had done really well. After walking quite a long way on her own, Saki became emotional and hugged Yuji. The next day, Yuji took Saki to visit her old house. There, she rediscovered the fragments of happiness that she had lost a long time ago. In that moment, Saki had a request. She wanted to receive a hug from Yuji. On another day, Yuji received a message from Makina. Makina wished for Yuji to become her father. And so, Yuji agreed to her request. He promised to protect Makina from the entire world. This surprised everyone around them. It turned out Makina had bought Yuji with a large sum of money. So Yuji decided to temporarily take care of her. He also didn't dare to leave Makina alone. But to Yuria, this situation could cause them a lot of trouble. Because Makina's family had been involved in politics for generations, which made Yuria afraid their organization could get dragged into it. At that moment, Yuji went to meet Yuria so he could learn more about Makina's family. That's when Yuji found out Makina's mother was named Kyoka. She had used her family's power for corruption. And Makina's father's death was also part of Kyoka's plan. After that incident, Makina suffered a psychological shock. And she lost her right to inherit the family fortune. Makina's younger sister became the official heir. At school, Chizuru announced to everyone that the first semester had come to an end. Starting tomorrow, they would be on summer break. So Yuji made a training schedule for Makina. It was so intense that everyone was surprised. The next day, Yuji and Makina practiced shooting together. But Sakari walked into their shooting range, which made Yuji angry, because it was extremely dangerous for Sakari. At that moment, Yuji asked her to try shooting as well. But Sakari immediately refused. Makina thought she wasn't fun at all. So Sakari decided to teach Makina a lesson. A little while later, they went to see Amane off as she returned home. Makina was curious why Yuji wasn't going home. But Yuji shared that he had no home to return to. But he would visit someone's grave. And that person was Yuji's master, who lived in the mountains. Suddenly, Makina decided that the two of them would go there today. So they quickly set off. The two of them traveled a long distance together. And eventually, they arrived at the destination. There were more things here than Makina had expected. In the afternoon, they visited Yuji's master's grave together. A while later, Yuji called Yuria to inform her that everything was fine here. Many days later, Makina was walking on the street when she happened to run into her younger sister. Her name was Serena. Although they were sisters, Serena's father was a stranger to Makina. And Serena wasn't allowed to mention her older sister. So Makina could only watch from afar. Suddenly, just as they ran into each other, Serena's car suddenly exploded. Now Makina was unconscious and lying in the dormitory. Sakari was also there to take care of her. Yuji didn't know what exactly had happened. At that moment, Makina woke up, and she immediately asked about Serena's condition. Fortunately, she had been taken to the hospital right afterward. So Makina breathed a sigh of relief. A while later, Yuji went to see Yuria. At that time, Yuria gave Yuji a mission. However, Yuji couldn't kill anyone at this point. Unexpectedly, his target this time was Makina. Yuji didn't expect the mission to be about killing a classmate. But Yuria didn't know whether Yuji would accept the mission or not. If Yuji refused, he would be immediately detained. In the end, Yuji had no choice but to accept the mission. However, before that, Yuji informed everyone at school that Makina was currently in danger. So she and Yuji would go into hiding for a while. Everyone hoped they would come back safely. Saki gave Makina a plant seedling hoping that one day they would smile again. And eat the apple from it together. On the road, Yuria spotted them. She asked how Yuji was doing. But he refused to tell her. It turned out that the one targeting Makina this time was actually her own family. Because Makina had now become a threat. The main reason was that she had fully recovered her health. As a result, the conflict within her family escalated. Because of Makina's extraordinary memory, she remembered the entire scandal involving Kyoka. Even more unexpectedly, last night, Makina called her mother and made a demand. If Kyoka didn't guarantee Serena's safety, Makina would expose her entire past. After hearing that, Yuji became determined to protect Makina's life, even if it meant putting his own life at risk. At that moment, Yuria felt helpless, because Yuji's personality was so similar to that of his master. As for Yuria's organization, they were currently narrowing down Yuji's location, and preparing to launch an attack on him. At that time, the two were hiding in a refrigerator. They were trying to endure it to outsmart the pursuers. And Yuji successfully escaped with Makina. However, Makina encountered a strange man. Luckily, she managed to take him down. But unexpectedly, there was another one nearby. They shot Makina. It caused her intense pain. Yuji quickly brought Makina to the hospital. However, Yuria blocked Yuji at the entrance. She thought Makina wouldn't make it, but by the next morning, Makina was lying in the hospital. And Kyoka was there as well. It turned out she saved Makina just to harvest her organs for transplanting into Serena. And it was going to happen as soon as possible. At that moment, Yuji disguised himself as a staff member. He successfully got close and shot Kyoka dead. Along with Makina's previous testimony, the police confirmed that Kyoka's corruption was real. And with that, everything came to an end. Makina successfully returned to Mahama Academy, bringing joy to everyone. When Yuji returned to the dormitory, Amane was surprisingly still waiting for him. Yuji was curious why Amane liked him, but Amane said it was love at first sight. Suddenly, Yuji moved closer and kissed Amane, which made her extremely shy, because that was Amane's first kiss. Yuji thought he could become Amane's boyfriend, but under one condition: if someday he disappeared or died, Amane must never cry. At that moment, she was ready to accept that condition, but Amane wanted to know whether Yuji truly loved her. So Yuji answered honestly. Amane's feelings had touched his heart. Although Yuji still wasn't sure about his own emotions, he admitted that he genuinely liked Amane. And just like that, they became a couple. This time, Amane suddenly burst into tears. She revealed to Yuji that she knew the identity of his older sister. 6 years ago, on the way back from training camp, a bus carrying 14 club members went missing, and the only survivor was Amane. Ever since Yuji transferred to Mahama Academy, Amane had recognized him, but she didn't know how to bring it up. And Amane gave Yuji a journal from that day. 6 years ago, on the way back, after everyone had finished the summer training, suddenly, the bus ran into trouble. When Amane woke up, she realized the person sitting next to her was Kazuki. She was Yuji's older sister. The two greeted each other, and at that moment, they successfully escaped from the bus, and they successfully rescued the remaining people. However, many were seriously injured after the accident, so Kazuki's group tried to perform first aid. At that moment, Kazuki took action, using the knowledge she had learned from books. But Kazuki's left arm was also injured. Amane knew it was her fault for falling on Kazuki. But Kazuki didn't want Amane to feel sad, because their current mission was to save lives. Eventually, their teacher regained consciousness. He himself didn't know what caused the accident, but Kazuki quickly identified the possible causes of the incident. At that point, everyone had no choice but to wait for help. But they might face serious difficulties, because the food supply might not be enough for everyone. By the evening, everyone quickly paired up to set up tents and rest through the night. At that time, Amane didn't know what would happen, but the days of living in hell had begun. The next morning, everyone tried to find a way to contact the outside. As for Amane, she was heading into the forest to look for Kazuki. It turned out Kazuki was foraging for food, because she wanted to save as much as possible. After all, Kazuki didn't know how long they would have to stay there. But Amane was worried that Kazuki had gone alone. At that moment, Kazuki was surprised, because someone actually cared about her. Back at the camp, someone told Amane about Kazuki's bad habits. So Amane's expression showed a bit of doubt. But Kazuki noticed it right away. She directly asked Amane, why did she choose to pair up with her? Amane sincerely replied, because she felt most drawn to Kazuki. This answer made Kazuki blush. Suddenly, they heard a strange noise. It was a helicopter flying overhead, so everyone tried to draw attention, hoping someone would come to rescue them. Unfortunately, the helicopter never came back. By the third day, 2 people had died, causing fear among everyone. This time, Amane learned that Kazuki had a younger brother. But Kazuki had always known that her little brother was constantly compared to her, and no one ever acknowledged his efforts. At this point, Amane was filled with worry and fear, because she didn't understand why everything had turned out like this. Amane truly just wanted to go home, so Kazuki quickly hugged her to comfort her. By the 6th day, Kazuki discovered that someone had stolen food, but she cleverly found a way to solve the issue. Kazuki even took care of those who were injured. She paid attention to everyone, even in the smallest details. And Amane had noticed all of that. By the 9th day since the accident, the teacher went to scout the area to find a way down the mountain. Hoping to save everyone, things gradually became more severe. And afterward, nothing changed. The teacher never came back to save them. Yet everyone still held on to a little hope of survival. But that hope slowly faded over time. Everyone did everything they could to stay alive. And surely, They would never forget this period of their lives. 2 weeks had passed. People began to experience serious health problems. It was beyond what they could endure. Hunger had gone completely out of control. Amane didn't know how she would survive. At that moment, Kazuki introduced her younger brother to Amane. His name was Yuji. If Kazuki managed to survive this accident, she said she would take Yuji to meet Amane. However, one by one, people began to pass away, leaving everyone overwhelmed and emotionally shattered. Amane broke down in tears, feeling helpless. By now, everyone had completely lost hope of survival. They no longer even felt sorrow. Some began doing things too horrific to believe. At that point, Kazuki made a plan with Amane. The two of them would head down the mountain together and return home. Because no one was coming to rescue them, Kazuki had been watching and realized the ones near them had become demons. So Kazuki and Amane tried to escape. Suddenly, their teacher discovered them, but fortunately, they managed to get away. However, it didn't take long before they encountered another demon. Clearly, these people could no longer return to the world of humans. At that moment, Amane began to struggle, so Kazuki gave her the last remaining food, along with a note showing the path down the mountain. Kazuki would take care of the rest. She warned Amane, never look back. And of course, in order to save Amane, Kazuki sacrificed her own life. The last time Amane looked into Kazuki's eyes, she didn't scream or show any fear. And Kazuki gave her one final smile, telling her not to worry. In the end, Amane was the sole survivor. When she returned alive from the accident, the press called Amane's survival a miracle. But many people started to question why. Why was Amane the only one who survived and escaped? Her trauma kept growing stronger. And back to the present, Yuji now knew. The reason Amane approached him was because of a debt. Because Amane believed it was her guilt, not exactly affection. However, when Amane lived with Yuji, she truly fell in love with him. She felt happy every time she thought of Yuji. At that moment, Yuji hugged Amane and comforted her. And he accepted Amane regardless of her past, hoping that one day, Amane would be able to forgive herself. And together, they decided to go to the site of the accident, hoping they could find whatever was left behind. When they arrived, Amane found a small box. She discovered a letter inside. They believed it might be from Kazuki. In the letter, she wrote that she wanted to reveal everything clearly. And she described the deaths of everyone in the clearest way possible. The cause came from many different factors. And Kazuki, as the one who saved Amane's life, had one request. If her little brother ever suffered, Kazuki hoped that Amane would help him. Because Yuji had always been timid since childhood. Though he wasn't very smart, he was extremely kind-hearted. But above all, he was Kazuki's most beloved little brother. A while later, Amane went to visit everyone's graves. She still felt a lingering fear deep inside. But Amane still expressed her gratitude to all of them. However, she received a phone call. The caller was the father of someone who had died in the accident. He was currently at Mahama Academy, causing everyone at school to be extremely worried. An hour earlier, a strange man had appeared at the school. This unknown man came looking for Amane. And then he pulled out a gun to threaten everyone. Amane was furious when the stranger attacked her friends. At that moment, Yuji and Amane rushed back to the school. And he asked Yuria for support. At Mahama Academy, Sakari was currently trying to create a distraction. But the man noticed someone hiding near the gate. People outside were discussing a strategy to rescue those inside. Yuji would try to use his skills to save everyone. Fortunately, Makina was clever. She understood Yuji's entire plan through coded signals. So Makina took immediate action. She tried to lure the man toward the location Yuji needed. Yuji was carefully observing the situation from the lighthouse. At that moment, Amane couldn't let everyone be in danger. So she decided to go inside and approach the man. It turned out that the man was furious. Because his daughter had been buried in a cold, lonely place after the accident, while Amane got to enjoy life surrounded by friends. So he held deep hatred toward Amane. Everyone around was worried for Amane because of the man's violent behavior. After a mental battle, Amane successfully led him into Yuji's line of sight. With the cooperation of the two, the man was subdued. Everyone was fortunately safe. Amane apologized to them for the incident. But everyone knew, none of it was Amane's fault. Sakari realized that each person carried their own burdens. And Yuji happily reunited with his friends. For Yuji at this moment, this is his beloved school. Alongside his wonderful friends, That's it for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in future videos. Thank you for watching. Much love always.